Thank you, Lynn. Welcome everyone to worship, meeting for worship. We have, for announcements, we have meeting for business, following meeting for worship this morning. We have a few items on the agenda, not lengthy ones, but important ones, so we hope friends can join us. And then Tuesday evening will be the Conversation with Christ book discussion continuing for those who would like to attend. Jonathan's our leader in that, and I will send out the link later today when I send out the link to the Zoom recording, the YouTube recording of meeting for worship. So, are there other announcements that need to be made at this time? How about joys and concerns to share? I'll start. Just received a text last evening from Sue Egan, who said that she was in Hendricks Regional Hospital. She had fallen on Friday the 13th and hit her head when she went down, but mostly hurt her back. And so she was in the hospital. She hoped to come home today. So that's the last update I have. She didn't say that they found anything. Well, they didn't find anything wrong with her head, so she didn't have a concussion or anything. But she didn't say what was wrong with her back or whatever. As I hear more, I'll send it out. But I figured you all would want to know that. Well, I'm sure there's lots on our hearts and in our minds, especially at this season. So let us do some centering silence. And I am the worship leader this morning, and then we'll speak out of the silence when I feel led. Well, for a scripture lesson, going to read from Matthew 2, the first 12 verses. And it begins, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born the King of the Jews? We saw a star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means the least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you shall become a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report him to me, so that I too may worship." After they'd heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. I've been thinking a lot about the wise men, the Magi, the past couple weeks, partly from our musical Christmas, that the recording wasn't so good a couple weeks ago. But these Magi, they pop up in Christmas songs, most notably We Three Kings. Of course, when I was a kid, we, even to a young adult, although I didn't do this part, our meeting always went caroling around to, as we used to say in the old days, shut-ins, those who were homebound, and we'd load into a bus, and the old beat-up church bus, and travel around, and mostly my dad and mom's Sunday school class, the High Yo Fo class, it was called, the Highland Young Folk, because that was where we originally were, at Highland Avenue Friends Church, and then we moved it to Westgate Friends Church out in the suburbs, and us kids thought they ought to be called Wee O Folk for the Westgate old folks, but because they were all in their 30s and 40s, they're pretty ancient. But my buddies and I would always mangle the lyrics to the songs. We'd make up our own. In We Three Kings, we're always trying to smoke a loaded cigar. That was how we sang it. I'm sure no other church kids ever did something like that. But these Magi, I think, have fascinated us through the centuries, so much so that Christian lore has given them names. Casper, Melchior, Balthazar, however you want to pronounce it. As we have with lots of the Christmas stories. I mean, there's things that just aren't in the Bible that we've got in our mind happened. There's no innkeeper going, "Well, there's no room in the inn. Sorry, you can't come in." There's no that person's not in the Bible. It's just when they get there, there's no room in the inn, so they go to the manger. Mary is not said to have ridden a donkey to Bethlehem from Jerusalem. We don't know how they got there. And likewise, we're not really sure that there were three kings. We know, according to Scripture, there were three gifts. The Magi, what we know of Magi at that time is that they were students of the stars. And in fact, those who were known as Magi, today we would consider a combination of astronomers and astrologists. They sought, their study was far different than NASA's as far as the stars. They were studying for deeper knowledge. They lived in a universe where they believed there was much more to life than science, that we were surrounded by angels and devils and spirits and all the things that we don't think about much because we're a scientific people. They may have traveled in a large entourage even, not just however many kings. They may have had a whole caravan. That's how they usually traveled. That would have been pretty impressive to Herod, and even more when they come to where the Christ child is. But they were considered highly educated and of high moral principles, and that's why Herod received them at court. They were worthy of respect. They had some kind of knowledge, which has always impressed me. They search the sky for signs. They see one. They know they are to go and search for this one, but they're not really sure this one what that much, other than he's to be born the King of the Jews. Well, in some ways, we today are probably more like the Magi than we are the shepherds and other people in the story. We're well educated. We have a scientific bent in some ways. The shepherds, they're kind of dirty people sitting out on the hill that were often considered ritually unclean because they had to touch dead animals. If one of their sheep got mauled, they had to do something with the carcass, and that made them unclean until they could get to the temple and become clean again. But as I thought about the Magi, I really started thinking about it a couple of weeks ago, as I said at the musical Christmas, in the song, "Do You Hear What I Hear?" And in it, there is a line, a child shivers in the cold, let us bring him silver and gold. And as I was sitting there, and that meeting house was a little chilly that morning for those of us who were there, I thought, why didn't they bring a blanket? Why did they bring these gifts that were of absolutely not much use to a little baby? It reminded me, as many things do, because my mind's like, oh, there's a squirrel. It reminded me of an old Peanuts cartoon that's one of my favorites, where Charlie Brown and Linus are all bundled up, and it's snowing, and they look over, and there's Snoopy sitting in the snow, getting covered, and he's shivering, and they go, oh, look, poor Snoopy's cold. We should do something for him. Well, what can we do? And then they walk over, all bundled up like they are, and they pat him on the head, and they both go, be of good cheer, be of good cheer. And then they walk away. And Snoopy's like, he gets that Snoopy look at him, and I thought, that's kind of like the silver and gold, except maybe Jesus, I'm sure, didn't do that. Now, I understand, that the Scripture's writing and talking about the symbolism. These kings are bringing gifts worthy of a king. But I also thought of all the gifts over the years that I've given at this holiday. There were gifts I would like to get. I remember, and I found them the other day going through old LPs. My father mentioned once that he liked Glenn Campbell's song, Gentle on My Mind, so I bought him a LP of Glenn Campbell, but it's mostly because I wanted a Glenn Campbell LP to play on our new stereo. And I probably have done that more about the gifts giving about me and my mindset than perhaps what would the receiver really want and could really use. And I've just been thinking an awful lot about that. If the wise men have a lesson for us besides recognizing that there's more beyond us in our physical existence, that there is this king, the king of all the universe, who's going to be born in Bethlehem, and we're going to go see him. Even metaphorically, what gifts are we bringing? What gifts are we bringing to the Christ child? The gifts he needs, the gifts he wants, or the gifts we think we want him to have? I often think back to the prophet who said, "And what does the Lord require of thee?" Well, it's not gold, frankincense, and myrrh. It's not the offerings that the people of Israel for so many years followed prescribed law to bring. It was to live humbly, do justice, and walk with our God. Some of those may sound outwardly easy, but I think of the last one, to walk with our God, and how easy it is not to. How easy it is to get so caught up in our lives, in the busyness all around us, that we don't give God the presence of ourselves. The spending time. One of the verses that struck me early, even as a kid, was in the Genesis story when Adam and Eve walked with God in the cool of the evening. And of course, that's reinforced by the gospel song in the garden. This idea of spending time with God. I mean, even now, when my time is much more my own than it has been the past few years, I think to myself, I still get so busy around here that at this time, do I give time to sitting in the presence of God? And like Samuel was urged to do, say, "Speak, Lord, for thy servant is listening." To me, it seems like while the other gifts are symbolic in wonderful things, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, the biggest thing that the Magi brought was presence. They traveled across trackless waste, following the star, trying to get towards that which they did not completely understand, but which would change the course of all humanity. To be invited into the presence is an amazing gift. And what gift do we bring this Christmas time? We'll now continue with more unprogrammed worship. We know there are those who need to leave. We wish you Godspeed and hope to see you at monthly meeting or next week at meeting for worship.
Thank you, Brent. As I was reflecting on Brent's message about the gift of being in the presence of God, I was wondering, what are we celebrating at Christmas time? Are we celebrating the birth of a human, or are we celebrating the birth of the revelation of the character of God, which was exhibited by Jesus in both his life and his message during his ministry? And I'm wondering, has our faith stalled out in the cattle stall of Bethlehem and the worship of a baby, or has our faith matured into focusing on the character of God as shown to us by that person who was born in the manger? And I find that a challenge as we are often consumed by the traditions of our culture.
I'm not sure why, but the question is, what do we bring to the Christmas? My mind went to the story of the talents, which is very much what was just spoken about in my mind. There's a real struggle in my mind with the worldly view of that. Talents can be looked at as money, the owner as your boss. And I think of the three people who got one got three talents, the other two, and one got one. My mind goes to the person who had one. And what the disappointment that was that he did not grow it speaks to me about how we hide ourselves and that we don't take chances to do what we need to do in this Christmas time or what we can do this Christmas time. It also takes me to the story of hiding your light under the bed. These are not really great stories right now, but they do remind me that there's so much more. There's so much more to these stories, to your story. And I'm grateful to be with you today.
If all hearts are clear, we'll close meeting for worship and then reconvene in about 15 minutes for a meeting for worship with attention to business.
Thanks for your words, Brent. Very helpful.
And thanks everyone else for their vocal ministry this morning.
That's right.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll hope to see you very soon.
Aye.